Hello and welcome to this week's edition of TRP News. I am your host, James Andre, and I want to thank you for joining me this week. This week I'm going to be talking about the Iran bill in Congress in regards to the Iran nuclear negotiations, the Loretta Lynch nomination, Medicare, the doc fix Medicare payments to doctors and hospitals, what's going on in Yemen, the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement or trade negotiations, and HIV in Indiana, and a twist on the religious freedom law in Texas, and it's not what you think. So first up is the legislation in Congress now in regards to the Iran nuclear negotiations. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee unanimously approved legislation last week, Tuesday, that would allow Congress to review and potentially reject President Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. So essentially the legislation gives Congress 30 days to review any agreement, and any agreement with Iran as long as it's submitted by July 10th. Now, I told you last week that my bet is that it's not going to be till the second week of July before we have an agreement with Iran, and apparently that's what Congress thinks as well, because that's what's in the bill. July 10th is the deadline they set for any agreement to be submitted to Congress. So one of the developments this past week was that White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said that President Obama would not veto the legislation as it currently is. Now, there's been a lot of amendments floated around and proposed ideas about things that should be in this legislation, and the senator who sponsored this bill has managed to keep it pretty simple. So it basically boils down to approval on the deal and approval on the lifting of sanctions. So pretty simple bill. Doesn't seem to really go that far, so people are saying it's not going to affect the Iran negotiations that much. And anyway, like I said before in the past, you'll know a bad deal if the deal that we reach immediately lifts sanctions. So no one wants to have that happen. President Obama is never going to agree to a deal where Iran immediately has all sanctions lifted at the beginning of an agreement. So this is just essentially a check and a balance, although it still is interfering with the president's authority to negotiate with foreign entities. Basically it's just a shortened review period. They wanted 60 days before, now it's only 30. And ironically, or not surprisingly, John Boehner was quoted as saying that he would hope not that we would not reach a deal with Iran. He's using the old we can't trust them trope, and I explained to you last week why that's kind of a funny thing to say, especially since we have done a lot of things to Iran that would make them not trust us. And in fact, there's been rhetoric on both sides and actions on both sides, and continuing to today, which we'll talk about when I get to Yemen, that there's reason for distrust on both sides. Well, the U.S. military is in at least 3 war zones now, and not a word from Congress, but they have weighed in on the president's efforts to prevent yet another war. So that kind of tells you what this legislation is about. Although there are Democrats that support it, I guess they're feeling left out, or they're in districts that are conservative or against the president. So, they feel the need to support this, but really it's just a sort of nonsense, again, attempt to interfere and disrupt the president's authority. And it's not of much significance in terms of what's going to happen with Iran, and it's not of much significance in terms of what's going to happen with this deal ultimately, because if there's a deal on the table and Iran is willing to comply, then who's going to vote it down? You're just basically saying we want war, and no matter who you are, we all know that 99% of Americans do not want war. I take that back. It's probably more like 85% do not want war. But there are a few crazies out there, a few bloodthirsty people who fear no consequence. But that's the state of the legislation right now. It's looking like it's going to go through, and we will have a 30-day review period. July 10th, as I said, week 2. They don't want to have it. The end of June is the deadline. It's probably going to run over, as these things always do. The next week is the 4th of July, Independence Day. Iran's not going to want to sign a deal on the 4th of July week, so that leaves the following week, and July 10th is the Congressional deadline. So again, these deadlines are not set in stone. This is just the idea to keep the pressure on the negotiations, and everyone wants a resolution. We don't want nuclear proliferation, and Iran, of course, wants their economy to start recovering from these P5+1 sanctions, the P5+1 being the United Nations Security Council plus Germany. So that's the current state of the bill in Congress. It looks like it's going to be passed. Next up is the Loretta Lynch nomination. I've talked to you in the past a little bit about this. Loretta Lynch, waiting longer as Attorney General nominee for confirmation than anyone has waited in the last 30 years. So this is a record wait. The Senate Republicans have somehow tied this to human trafficking legislation. Why? Well, that's what Republicans do. They like to mix and match legislation. They like to put their eggs in different baskets and attach a parachute to them, whatever they can do, apparently just to see what sticks to the wall. So 5 months she's been waiting, and the human trafficking bills I talked to you about before in previous episodes, they snuck in some Hyde Amendment language, which has become commonplace in congressional legislation these days, which addresses the use of federal funds to pay for abortions. So they want the Hyde Amendment language in this human trafficking bill. Democrats object because there are no federal funds in this human trafficking bill. What it does is set up a fund, but these are private funds. These are funds seized from criminals to be used to largely, as it turns out, pay for law enforcement. So it's to pay for law enforcement training, law enforcement programs, court programs. So it doesn't really, a lot of it doesn't really go directly to help victims of human trafficking, although it says victim-centered human trafficking, but it's not really. This bill is half of it is kind of nonsense, if you ask me. The other half is just cleaning up language from previous legislation that's already on the books. And as I said in previous episodes, crime is crime. We don't need to redefine it. We don't need to establish new training programs. This should already be a part of our law enforcement milieu. This should be something that should be happening already, and we don't need special funds to pay for it. If law enforcement agencies are short on funds, then we should address that directly. But the Loretta Lynch nomination has been tied to that, and so there's been a rising tide of protest and people speaking out, organizations gathering members and starting actions in support of Loretta Lynch, including Al Sharpton, his National Action Network, staging a hunger strike. And oddly enough, as soon as the opposition starts building and the protests start building, well, we have several people appear on the Sunday news programs yesterday, as of this taping, and saying, "Oh, it's going to be just a few more days." So suddenly now it's just a few more days. They're saying that the legislation. Well, essentially what they've done is put this legislation on the docket, and Loretta Lynch confirmation comes after it. And they basically say there's a procedure. First, this legislation, then the confirmation. And until this legislation goes, then there's no confirmation. Well, suddenly they say that there's going to be a resolution to this human trafficking bill, and there will be a vote on the Loretta Lynch's confirmation for Attorney General. Senator Mike Lee was on Meet the Press, and he said there will be a vote in a few weeks. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee was on State of the Union, and said that he expects a deal to quickly come together this week. And even Jeb Bush weighed in, saying, I think presidents have the right to pick their team. So suddenly the tide has turned. I can't help but think that the gathering forces in support of Loretta Lynch have something to do with this. As a matter of fact, President Obama came out strongly saying this was an embarrassment, the partisanship has gone too far, and you know he doesn't directly address a lot of these situations. So another thing that happened was Harry Reid came out on Rachel Maddow, and he did an interview with her, and he said, well, this has gone on long enough, and we'll put up with it for a few more days, and after that, we're not waiting any longer. We're going to force a vote. So suddenly, the human trafficking bill gets pulled off the docket, and Republicans are saying, oh, it's going to be resolved, it's going to be resolved. So Harry Reid really shook them quite a bit. The president apparently shook them quite a bit. I don't know why they take these positions and then back off of them and take these nonsense positions where they're not really taking a stand for anything, really. If you really look at what they're doing, you know, it's just plain obstructionism. And so when they get called on it and when the country starts to say, hey, what are you doing, they have no choice but to back down. Just like the budget ceiling, the spending ceiling, you know, they're even saying now, oh, it's going to pass before we even get to the deadline. Now there's going to be some hullabaloo at the end, but when it comes down to it, these guys are apparently going to have a vote this week. You know, Senator Mike Lee, they tried to come up with another excuse, an alternative excuse to the human trafficking bill, and he said, well, you know, Loretta Lynch refused to acknowledge that there are any limits to executive authority. Well, you know what, this is just a flat-out lie. He's a liar. You know, she never said that. I went through the transcript. I looked myself. What she said was that I've looked at the opinions people have about the specific executive actions, and now I'm paraphrasing and just describing what she said, and you can go check for yourself. She said, I've looked at these opinions about these specific actions, particularly immigration, and I think the language is perfectly reasonable. So that's all she said. She addressed some specific actions, and she addressed the legal opinions that she had available to her, and she said they seemed reasonable. She didn't say there were no limits on executive power. She didn't say she was 100% behind immigration, the exact thing that Obama has done under immigration, and she would do everything to support it. In fact, Loretta Lynch will be the Attorney General, which is a law enforcement position. She's the Chief Prosecutor of the United States of America. Her job is not to make law. Her job is to prosecute the laws, to uphold the laws of the United States of America. So it doesn't matter if someone, you know, these executive actions are being litigated in court. If the court says they're illegal, then she will be obligated to enforce that. If they say they're legal, then she will enforce that. So this is another lie, another red herring, more BS from the Republicans, basically backpedaling, side-pedaling, trying to make themselves look okay, give themselves an excuse for their bad behavior, for their obstructionist behavior, for their nonsense, you know, upholding the business of the United States government, basically for no reason at all other than spite. So, you know, Harry Reid had that interview with Maddow, and now, you know, they're saying it's going to be this week. So in a few days of this, by the time you see this, and you know, these predictions just go to show you how much of this is really just theater, how much of it is just made up posturing and pandering. You know, I hate to say it, these people are just they know what's going to happen, and they try to create this drama as if, you know, there's some huge battle going on. There's some sort of mystery, there's some sort of arcane spell that needs to be cast in order to break the logjam. But really, it's just these guys being idiots and jerks up there on the Hill and not doing business in the way that's in the best interest of the United States of America. So we will see what happens this week, and hopefully we do have a vote, and Loretta Lynch is confirmed. That'll be great. So that's what's going on with that, and we'll see what happens this week. We'll let you know. Next up, one thing that Congress did manage to accomplish in the past week was a permanent fix to the so-called doc fix. The doc fix is the fix for Medicare payments to doctors and hospitals. What was happening is that there was a 1997 law that was intended to slow down the growth of Medicare payments to doctors and hospitals, and it limited the reimbursement. And it was apparently too severe for a lot of these medical practitioners and medical organizations. And they essentially said, hey, if this is how you're going to operate, we're not going to accept Medicare. So that would essentially limit the availability of health care to anyone using Medicare to pay for it. And since that was a problem, and of course no one wants to see that happen, Congress has been every year since 1998 putting in, passing this temporary fix, which basically prohibits the pay cuts from going into effect. So it's the bill would have the pay cuts would have been a 21% cut in Medicare payments, and it would have taken effect this month, the end of April. And so what they did is they changed that, and they created this bill which has a different payment structure altogether. So it provides incentives for physicians to bill Medicare patients for their overall care. For example, treatment of an illness, not individual office visits or individual procedures. So not a la carte billing, instead of billing for total care overall. So that's called fee for service. So basically, you go in, you pay for a doctor's visit, you pay for a blood test, you pay for a urine test, and you pay for whatever else, a lab of any kind, and a la carte. So you keep going back. Oh, we'll throw another test in. We'll try this test. We'll try that. We'll prescribe this. And so critics say the fee-for-service approach leads to unnecessary medical tests and procedures and results in payments no matter how the care turns out. So these guys get paid every visit, every procedure, even if it's not necessary or even if it doesn't help someone get well. So that's the idea. That was part of the idea behind the Affordable Care Act. That's part of the idea behind the overhaul of the Medicare, is that we base payments and we base incentives on outcomes, preventative care, not just providing a large amount of care. We threw every test in the book at them, but they died. So that's not good enough anymore. And hopefully we'll keep strengthening that idea as we go in this country. And as I said, it's a bipartisan legislation. So the measure passed the House with an overwhelming majority, and last Tuesday it cleared the Senate, only 8 senators voting no. So President Obama signed this into law. This fix that has been going on for nearly 2 decades is now permanently fixed, and hopefully the doctors will be happy. Hopefully Medicare will, they said they've already been paying people at the higher rate, and there's a few payments that have been processed at the lower rate, but that will be reprocessed. So everything will hopefully smooth out, and we can continue down the road towards improved health outcomes in this country and improved delivery of health care. And so that happened in the last week. Medicare payments, the doc fix is fixed permanently. All right, and now I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Yemen. Right now, Saudi Arabia is in the middle of a, so far, months-long bombing campaign in Yemen. What happened is that Saudi Arabia had a president in Yemen that they had backed, they had helped get into power, named of Hadi, and he came into power in 2012. And so lately, last year, a rebellion led by a people called the Houthis, which is a Shiite political movement, seized Yemen's capital, Sana'a. So when that happened, Hadi fled Yemen. He's been in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has been trying to beat back this revolution, this uprising, and reinstall Hadi as president of Yemen. So now the Saudis and the exiled President Hadi are saying the Houthis are Iranian puppets. So they're being supported by Iran. There doesn't seem to be much question of that they do have Iranian support. Iran is in the area. Iran is sending ships to the area. So there doesn't seem to be much doubt about that. Of course, Saudi Arabia is, Hadi is apparently Saudi Arabia's puppet. So, the country right now is in extreme turmoil, and there's a lot of different factions fighting there. And in fact, there's so much disruption and so much chaos that AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, is actually taking towns and taking ground in Yemen. So there actually is a resurgence of Al-Qaeda because of this war that's going on, this revolution, this uprising, this coup, whatever you want to call it. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, seized Mukalla Airport and a military base that had a lot of heavy weapons. So now they have an airport and a lot of weapons at their disposal. And not only that, Mukalla is the place where the airport is a main seaport and capital city of a coastal region in Yemen. So this is a major port, both air and sea. It's a major financial center. They looted a central bank there, and they also now have control of military weaponry. So this is a boon for Al-Qaeda, what's been happening. Saudi Arabia is an enemy of Al-Qaeda. However, they've been busy with the Houthis, and they feel like the AQAP is something that's on the back burner, apparently, at this point. So Iran, as I said, has been sending ships there. They sent as many as 9 ships towards Yemen, which they think may be an attempt to resupply the Houthi rebels. Like I said, I don't think there's any doubt about that. They seem to be interested in having these Shias take power there. And the thing that's of interest to us, largely besides the destabilization of another Middle Eastern country, is that the U.S. Navy is in the region and has already consensually boarded, that's the phrase they use, a Panamanian flagged ship in the Red Sea on April 1st on the suspicion that it was illegally carrying arms for the Houthis. So the U.S. Navy is in the area. The U.S. Navy is running interdiction, apparently, on ship traffic in the area. And we are participating in this war as we speak. Army Colonel Steve Warren says, "We will continue to vigilantly defend freedom of navigation and to conduct consensual searches in an effort to ensure that drugs, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, and other contraband are limited." So the U.S. has been supporting the Saudi Arabia airstrikes with intelligence, logistical support, and last week they began doing refueling duties for Saudi fighter jets. So now to tell you what's going on in this country, this is how big a mess this is. These are all the actors that are involved right now. We have Saudi Arabia, we have the United States, we have Iran, we have the Houthi, we have what people are blaming a lot of this uprising on is the former president named Saleh. And we have also in the region, just like we do in Afghanistan, we have armed tribes that exist, different factions that have a sort of a military bent. So they are fighting, and actually they're fighting against Al-Qaeda. So they are one of the things that is resisting the growth of Al-Qaeda here. And we have the AQAP. So, and as far as we're concerned, we have the Army, Navy, Air Force, and drones. So there's been at least 3 drone strikes that have killed leaders of the Houthi rebels. So we are fighting this war with Saudi Arabia. We have people there. We have ships running interdiction. We are basically involved in a war in Yemen with Saudi Arabia against factions supported by Iran. So criticism on both sides is free and heavy. but it pretty much seems to be a fight over which puppet is going to end up ruling. So fears that this is going to be a proxy war are a little late. It's a done deal. This is a proxy war. We're heavily involved. We're spending a lot of money over there, a lot of time, and we have men and women over there in support of Saudi Arabia. And meanwhile, AQAP is flexing their muscles, gaining resources and territory. So that's what's happening in Yemen. I just wanted to give you an update on that. I haven't talked about Yemen much lately. Another big issue, which I promised to get to before too long, is the humanitarian issue with all these wars and conflicts going on. There's something like 150,000 people are projected to be displaced out of this, or it might even be a larger number. But there is people who are being forced to leave their homes. You may have heard that even Americans couldn't get out, and they were upset with the State Department. People are being trapped, or people are being displaced with nowhere to go, just trying to avoid the fighting. And right now in the Middle East, let me tell you, this humanitarian issue, this refugee issue, this people being displaced from their homes is a huge, huge, huge issue. We've got people living in terrible, terrible conditions, all because of armed conflict, and really, really hopefully comes to a stop soon. But I just want to let you know what's going on with Yemen. We'll get to the refugee problem in some upcoming episodes, but we'll keep you informed on what's happening here and the United States involvement. Again, we've got legislation about how the Congress can interfere with the president's constitutional authority to negotiate with foreign countries when it comes to an Iran nuclear deal, but silence when it comes to Yemen. All right, and next I want to talk to you a little bit about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Okay, this is it's a hot topic in the news, especially in this past week. I try to keep on top of things that are happening in the previous week. And what happened this past week is that the Congress came up with legislation, so-called fast-track legislation, in order to expedite the process of negotiation for the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. A lot of people on the left are upset about this. As far as I can tell, basically the attitude is there's no such thing as a good trade deal. There's a lot of complaints about secrecy and a lot of finger pointing, saying, well, if the Republicans are willing to give the president this authority, then what does that tell you? There's a lot of issues to this, and I've been looking into it, and I got to tell you, I said last week, it seems like a lot of these things may be overblown. A lot of this may be a bunch of noise about nothing or the wrong thing, and believe me, I'm willing to listen to you. If you think I'm wrong about this, please let me know in the comments or send an email, whatever you feel the need to do. But I've been looking into this, and trust me, I'm very news savvy. I've been listening to Bernie Sanders. I've been listening to Elizabeth Warren. I've been listening to Democracy Now!, Move On, and I am not hearing solid criticism of this action. Not to mention that Barack Obama, the man we put into office twice, this is a key initiative of his, something he wants to have happen. And, I don't know why we're not taking him at his word. And this is a big thing lately. We don't want to believe anything a politician says. Well, we don't really have to believe anything a politician says. If there's something you don't like, or something you want to have happen, or something about this trade deal that bothers you, then definitely let your representatives know. But until that happens, a bunch of hollering about basically any trade deal that exists ever is just kind of pointless to me. So, people cite the trade deficit. That seems to be a big complaint. In fact, it's saying that, well, past trade deals have, led to a trade deficit, and that is cost basically, people have offshored jobs, people have offshored manufacturing, and, some of that may be true. Although, as I said before, studies have shown that it's not necessarily exactly true that is the case. A lot of this globalization is going on without a trade deal. A lot of trade is going on without a trade deal. So, we have to really look at the factors that are involved. And in fact, when I was looking at some of the liberal complaints about this and some of the citations, looking back at the trade deficits going back to about 1969, 1968, there seems to be more of a correlation with which party controls the White House than there is with when a trade deal is signed. So in fact, we had NAFTA and the trade deficit went down for the next 10 years. Okay, so we as a matter of fact, every Republican president, the trade deficit went up. Every Democratic president, there was a reduction in the trade deficit. So I'm not sure that this is tied to trade deals. There's a lot of economic factors that are involved. Yes, maybe there were some bad things about some of these trade deals in the past, but isn't that even more of a reason to keep negotiating them as things change, as time goes by, to make them better? We already have agreements, as I said last week. 6 of the 11 countries involved here already have free trade agreements with us. So isn't it a good idea to keep negotiating this and keep improving our position? Because what's the opposite? Trade obstructionism, high tariffs, a limit on imports, demands on exports, and what is that actually going to do to our economy? That's what I see on the left is a lot of crying about trade deals, but I don't see them talking about the impacts or even specifics on things that need to be improved. So, people are complaining, and I say specifics, people are complaining a lot, well, these are secretive deals, these are secretive, no one knows what's happening, no one knows what's going on. Well, that is, I'm afraid, I hate to say it, but a lot of these Democrats are just flat out lying to you, okay? They are just lying to you. People know what's going on. People know what's happening. People understand the framework of the negotiation. People understand the purpose of the negotiation. Just think about this logically, all right? This is so secretive. No one knows what's in this trade negotiation. This top secret. They won't share it with us. And it's going to do this, 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 and this. Well, how do you know what the trade deal is going to do if you don't know what's in it? How do you know the bad impacts it's going to have if no one will share the points of the negotiation with you? It's illogical. It doesn't make sense, and that's how you know it's simply not true. This is a lot of posturing. It's really sad to see. I vote Democrat most of the time, although I am not a Democrat. I'm a progressive. But Democrats are generally the best chance I have to forward policies that I agree with. But I will say this, these guys are just pandering to the left here because they hear people complaining about trade deals. And they are basically lying to their constituency and telling you they have no idea what's going on. Well, it's not true, and I'll show you why here in just a second. First of all, there are concerns with any trade deal. Like I've said last week, any legislation, any trade agreements, any policy changes should be carefully considered and carefully written. But you know what? There are concerns that should be addressed in this particular negotiation, but no one is going to listen to people screaming about the sky is falling, okay? People are talking about how only businesses are being consulted, only heads of corporations are being consulted. I'm concerned as the next guy. As I said last week, I'm not a big fan of the nature of corporatism in this country. I don't believe corporations are people. I don't think it's right that they have rights to speech and civil rights. And when they don't have an actual physical body, they don't have mortality and they have no morality. So I don't think they should be given the same rights as people do. But at the same time, let's look at things reasonably here. This is simply not true that only corporations are getting a say in this, all right? I'm going to use Australia as an example. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has had over 1,000 consultations since 2011 with groups representing agriculture, industry, health, intellectual property, energy, business, community organizations, consumers groups, unions, and academics. In fact, there was a protest about the TPP in Australia from the Council of Trade Unions, and the Council of Trade Unions has been consulted 14 times and has influenced the negotiations. So this is the kind of craziness that's going on the left here, and I got to wonder, some of it is coming not just from the left, but some of it's coming from various factions, and I think a lot of the politicians are thinking that this is their constituency. You know, this is what happens. The politicians tend to listen to the loudest voices, and I got to tell you, stop and think about this. I'm not saying that this deal is perfect or ideal or should go through exactly as it is, but, you know, just saying it's a bad deal and calling people names is not going to do anything good for us as progressives, as liberals, and it's not going to be effective, okay? As a matter of fact, so there are two areas here that I notice right away that are a concern about this trade deal. One is the investor versus state dispute tribunal, okay? This is where these companies can take basically a country to court and sue them if there is some breach of the agreement or some sort of trade obstruction that's not supposed to be there, and basically win money. So these tribunals exist already, actually, and for the most part, they do. If a company does take a country to court, they have won. I think the rate is 100%. Now, the United States will tell you that, well, these are countries who've actually violated the agreement. So, of course, there's a winning record on this. It's a 3-person tribunal, and, so that's a concern because a multinational corporation can influence policy in a country, as I said last week, that they are not necessarily based in. So that's one concern. That's something that should be looked at carefully. And the prescription drug rules are another area that should be looked at carefully. So there's some concerns about that, about the effect of these negotiations serving to raise the prices for prescription drugs around the world, basically protecting the prescription drug market, which is, as a liberal or progressive, is a whole other issue, and that's a whole other episode on its own. But that's one of two areas. But, lefties, we need to stop imitating the right wing and just screaming about things we don't want. We can't be like the Republicans. We can't be like the right wing, and just say no, 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 no. We've got to be smart. We've got to do things right, okay? If there's specific issues that are wrong with this trade deal, then voice those. Contact your representatives. Let them know. If there's things you want to happen, if you want tariffs and you want limits on multinationals, then get a policy position and start passing it around. Start pushing it. Get the organizations you're a member of to push for this. But screaming no trade, no trade, no trade is just really silly and absurd, because it's going to happen. There's trade going on as we speak. There's free trade already going on. We're basically in a free trade situation with all the members of the TPP. So to think that we're never going to renegotiate the terms of these agreements is just crazy talk. Okay? So, the fast track legislation essentially, now here's an example of how you know that this is a bunch of BS, and sad to say, Democrats are lying to you about their understanding of what's happening. They complained about the last minute deal going into a hearing for the fast track legislation, something like called that day or called the day before, something less than 24 hours notice to read this legislation, something like 133 pages. It is a lot to read, but let me tell you something. This is nothing new in this legislation. Everyone knows what's in this legislation. I read this legislation and I've seen it before. Okay, I saw it weeks ago. And it's just codified now into congressional legislative language, and I'm just going to pick a couple of lines for you to give you an idea. First of all, it does not cut out Congress. Congress still has a say. They still get approval on any agreement. So right there, that's one myth. No, this just gives an expedited process, okay? Congress still gets to look at the agreement, still gets to have approval on the agreement. And if you look at the top of this agreement, these are just two examples, but, all the language is similar, okay? The purpose of this legislation is to foster economic growth. Oh, no. Raise living standards, oh my gosh. Enhance the competitiveness of the United States. Promote full employment in the United States. And enhance the global economy. These are all terrible things. Why would anyone want those? Okay? These are the objectives of the negotiation. This is the authorization that President Obama is getting from Congress, all right? This is what's up for a vote right now and what hopefully, and President Obama hopes to have passed into law. Secrecy. Oh my God, we don't know what's going on. We're not going to have a chance. They're going to pass this without telling us what's in it. It's a lie, people. It's a lie. Consultations during negotiations. This is the law that they wrote. Okay? This is what's in the law that President Obama hopes to have passed. Consultations during negotiations. There's a whole section on this, right? And one of the sections says, in the course of negotiations conducted under this act, the United States Trade Representative shall meet upon request with any member of Congress regarding negotiating objectives, the status of negotiations in progress. Okay? It goes on to say that they have to, on demand, provide the papers from the negotiation. They have to provide the negotiating points. They have to provide the status of the negotiation immediately on request. That's in the law. Okay? So I don't know what to say about this, really. It's just a wild thing, and it's kind of sad to see, as I said, and I'll keep saying this, it seems like a lot of people on the left are just sort of adopting the mentality of the right wing, just screaming, no, 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 no. And let me tell you, that's not how we do it, okay? Let's think about what we're doing. Let's not be ones who just shoot ourselves in the foot and do things that are against our own interests. Okay? Now, like I said, maybe there's some things that are wrong with this. Let me know. Please let me know. Okay? But as it stands right now, I have yet to hear specifics. I hear all the doom saying, the gloom saying. I hear about how jobs are going to go overseas. I hear about multinational corporations getting richer, but no one talks about the mechanism. No one talks about how that's going to actually happen. It's just going to happen. Okay? No, folks, no, no, no. Let's look at the legislation. Let's develop policies about trade and about globalization that we think are progressive, that we think support a liberal agenda, a liberal idea, and a liberal worldview, and let's put that forward. Let's make sure it's a part of this agreement. Let's make sure that these things are protected. Let's not just go off half-cocked, screaming the sky is falling, talking about no trade deals ever, never negotiate a trade deal. Let's talk about what should be in a trade deal. Do we have any idea, or are we just going to shout no in perpetuity? Okay? So, like I said, I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking, and maybe I'm wrong about this. I wouldn't be shocked, and I'm more than happy to hear if I am, but please let me know. And right now, so far, I don't see it. So a lot of screaming on the left, but please, guys, take a look at this. Think about what you're saying. Think about your criticisms. Make them specific. Make them logical. And, let's make sure that this goes down in a good way. To say never negotiate a trade deal, like I said, it's just not, it's insane, okay? So, how do we negotiate a trade deal? How do you want to have it happen? Let's work for things. Let's not just scream no like the crazy right wing. All right, next up, update on Indiana and the HIV outbreak in Scott County, southeastern state of Indiana, southeast of the state of Indiana, in the southeastern part of the state of Indiana. Scott County seen an increase in cases of HIV driven by intravenous drug use. Governor Pence there in the state of Indiana has waived the state's needle exchange ban only for Scott County, the area most affected. And they're seeing also spiking cases of hepatitis C, an infection that has a strong correlation to HIV. So basically, the intravenous drug users are likely to be infected by either or both. So this waiver on the state's needle exchange ban is set to expire at the end of the month, I guess because AIDS goes away at the end of the month. But they say that it possibly can be extended. So we will see what happens there. But I'll tell you what's going on right now. There is actually a Republican in the state legislature who has introduced a bill to expand the needle exchange program to 22 other counties that are considered to be at risk. So we have a total of 23 counties where this is considered to be an issue. They're seeing spikes in hepatitis C, and they're concerned about a rise in HIV infection and intravenous drug use. And so they've had this, in Scott County, they've had this needle exchange program going on for, I think it's something like 2 weeks now. And there's an issue because the police are actually arresting some people for possession of needles, even though there is a waiver in this county. So they are actually working against the program. There's a guy came in from out of state to help operate this needle exchange, and he's saying that the local officials do not want to hear what he has to say. They have something like, at this point, I think 88 people have participated in the program, and 86 people. They've collected 1,400 used syringes and distributed 5,322 clean syringes. Now, the Deputy Health Commissioner, Jennifer Walthall, defended, they have a metered exchange, which means that each individual can only get so many needles, and she defended limiting the number of needles given to each person, insisting that a measured handout was appropriate for Austin, which is a city in Scott County. I guess appropriate because it's appropriate? What does this have to do with public health? Arbitrary republicanism? I guess that's the answer to that. She says, remember that Chicago is an urban setting and this is not. This is a place that has never had a needle exchange program before, and they are implementing a model they are comfortable with and will work for the population here. Will work for the population here. Now, this is the same government health commission that allowed the outbreak to happen, that allowed the epidemic, the so-called epidemic, to happen and to increase. 24, 26 new cases this week, 24 more cases of HIV in the last week, 22 counties at risk of finding themselves in similar circumstances. So what does this woman know? What does this health commissioner know about what's going to work for the people of Austin? I don't think a whole lot. She's actually defending the law enforcement officers, saying, of course they're conflicted because, law enforcement. So that's what's happening right now. End of the month, this needle exchange waiver is supposed to due to expire. Although there is some movement for not only extending the program but expanding it, which I think is a hell of an idea, and they need to get on it. But we will see what happens. The program started April 4, and to me, listening to this woman, this health commissioner, talk about the police, defending the police and defending the limitations of the needle exchange program, it's just another example to me of public officials defending people's sensibilities instead of defending the public interest, the public health. I mean, who cares how people feel or if they're conflicted? Who cares if this is proven? Now, the needle exchange programs are proven proven effective technique to limiting this sort of situation. And why step on it? Why would you do that? You know why? Because I think there's an us versus them mentality. There's it's those people. It's only those people who have this sort of problem. I don't inject drugs, so I'm not going to have a problem. It's them, and they'll only need so many needles. Even though I know nothing about the drug world, about intravenous drug use, hey, this is what works for the people of Austin. I mean, it's pure silliness, and I think the neighboring states and neighboring counties should be really, really concerned. Trust me, folks, it can happen to normal people, and let me tell you, I think these people need to get serious. They need to wake up before things go further than they expect, before they start finding the HIV virus in their medical blood supply, before they find it in their public schools, in school staff and officials, and eventually children. This stuff doesn't just stay contained. As I said last week, these people are drug users, some of them desperate, some of them do desperate things. Turn to prostitution, turn to crime, sell blood in order to get money. So, this is something these people really need to wake up on. And let me tell you, public officials around the country and around the world, you need to stop worrying, especially if you're not an elected official, you need to stop worrying about defending people's sensibilities and do your job, defend the public interest, defend the public health, and do what's best, what works, in order to get the job done and protect the citizens that you're responsible for. This is just a no-brainer. So we'll keep you updated on that. Hopefully they expand this program. Obviously, or hopefully it's apparent that I'm not an intravenous drug user, but I recognize what works, and I think it's silly not to, and they should go ahead and really jump on this aggressively, not worry about how conflicted the police are, or how, whether someone has one needle too many or not. That is just, penny wise, pound foolish. All right, and finally for this episode, the religious freedom laws. This one in Texas, and it's not what you think. You may have heard about this past week. Someone is using the religious freedom law in Texas, which is a 15-year-old law, as a defense after being charged with a crime. So Joan Cheever is a San Antonio woman. She's been feeding the homeless for the past decade, and last week she was cited by police for handing out food at a local park. Cheever says she's been feeding people at Maverick Park since 2005, and now she's facing a $2,000 fine for doing so. She was feeding the homeless last week, and 4 bike patrol officers rolled up and ticketed her for providing food out of a vehicle other than a food truck. So I guess that's a citation. That's a health department citation or violation, or a permitting violation. And so she believes that Texas's 15-year-old Religious Freedom Restoration Act should protect her feeding the homeless. And she goes to court at the end of the month. But this is another case of Republicans and the unintended consequences of their legislation, only this time it works out for the good guys. Here's a case where she's trying to do something good, and hopefully this law can be put to some good use. She's due in court, I think, the 29th of this month, April, and I'll let you know how it turns out. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm James Andre, and we will see you again next week.